Okay, so Resident Evil Requiem's looking pretty good, but what if you've never even played Resident Evil 2 or 4, which features our protagonist, Leon S. Kennedy? Or maybe you're thinking about going back and replaying those games. Well, I'm going to give you the real perspective on whether it's worth playing Resident Evil 2, in this case, which is Resident Evil 2 review. And of course, we're talking about the remake more than the classic per se. I should probably do a separate review for the classic one. So essentially, a deadly virus has engulfed Raccoon City, as it was called back in 1998, and the events take place in September of 1998. And as I mentioned, you play as Leon S. Kennedy, as well as the sister of the original game's protagonist, or one of the protagonists, continuing the tradition of Resident Evil 1 of having two characters that you get to play as. What's interesting about Resident Evil 2 is you're able to select which characters you play as based on the discs that you inserted, and then see their parallel story. Now, this is similar, except for obviously now you could be playing the game digitally and also seeing those parallel stories crossing over, taking place at the same time, same day, same moment, apparently. Although that could be argued in terms of the consistency of all of that. So one of the big gameplay differences with Resident Evil, a survival horror series, of course, Resident Evil 2, and their classic one, is that you don't have to use ink ribbons. That was one of the big challenges of the original. And because of that, it makes the game a lot easier. You're also not using a third-person fixed camera. Some of us love it, some of us hate it, some of us like both, but it makes it much more modern. Resident Evil 2 2019 release here, so you're able to really get a feel of a modern take on a classic game. Using the over-shoulder camera, we would get more familiar with a Resident Evil 4, the OG version. Now, with it being a survival horror, you are meant to manage your ammo and maybe use some knife strats and so forth, so there's a bit of challenge there. You are expected to die and learn from your mistakes. Even more so when we had to actually deal with things like ink ribbons, ribbed for a pleasure, as I always used to say. It never used to go down well, and it still isn't going to. But this is a lot more easier and forgiving than the original. Now, obviously, it's always more fun if you have played the original, because then you get to kind of compare an original to a new version. I would say it's still worth playing the original if you don't mind fixed cameras, managing your saves, and just being able to really appreciate the differences. One of the big hallmarks of Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 2 Remake is this 2019's representation of a certain Mr. X.
Jesus Christ!
Probably still of the modern era, much less classic era's, most harassing and intimidating stalker of the series. So you'll have that to look forward to as well. In fact, I'd highly recommend you don't chew his hat unless you love achievements, as I learned, and a million other people learned, to my detriment.
Shit, he's pissed. Oh shit, he's pissed!
So should you play the original, as in the 2019 version? I would say it definitely will help, because obviously your character here is first introduced in Resident Evil 2, and then his story continues in Resident Evil 4. And actually when I haven't played Resident Evil 6, which is also in as well. And I'm sure there may be some other ones here and there, what have you. But those are the core main ones, and I would say definitely you want to be playing Resident Evil 2 first, especially if you play the modern one, because you'll be able to really get a sense of it. It's a great game, and I highly recommend it if you're into horror mixed with a little bit of action. Now, this one is the least action compared to Resident Evil 4, but also more scary for it, I would say. But just a great game overall. Now, the only problems I had with Resident Evil 2 in terms of my rating for it, and most of this won't affect you enjoying it, as long as you enjoy survival horror and you don't mind conserving bullets and aiming for the head and avoiding Mr. X's pork pie hat, are things like the first and second runs. So you have 4 scenarios in Resident Evil 2. Now, the idea is that you finish one scenario and then you converse over to the second character scenario. So you start maybe with Leon's A campaign, and then you do Claire's B campaign. And then when you finish the B campaign, you do the A campaign of Leon and then the B campaign of Claire. I know it's confusing. I even had to do an online to try and figure out what's the canon order and so forth. But essentially you do that and you get different paths, different story beats. Essentially you're encouraged and are pretty much expected to play the game 4 times to get the full thing and to get the true ending, as it were. And the same thing is meant to be the case with the 2019 version, but to be honest with you, and many people agreed with me on this, I would say overall from what I've seen online, the scenario A and B thing doesn't really work that great in Resident Evil 2 2019 because it's pretty much the same thing. The changes are very, very minute in comparison to the original 1998 version. I hope I'm getting the year right for the classic one. I'm sure people will correct me in the comments if I'm not. So that's a bit of a disappointment, and maybe doesn't warrant 4 playthroughs the way that the original did. It's also a little bit longer as well, I believe, so it will take longer to do that compared to the classic one. There are also extra modes that give you an impression of a continuation of stories that you encounter in the game, but really they're just special kind of survival points modes, but they do come across like they're actually some kind of canon stories, but they're not. So that's kind of disappointing as well. And then probably this one's the one I was talking about that's not really going to affect you if you never played the originals anyway, and I'll say the music. Resident Evil 2 has some of the best music in a video game, them full stop, as with the original. However, really none of the tracks are remixed in this game, and you even barely hear the safe room music. At least when I was playing it, it would either stop very quickly or just be very brief, and it's really the only thing that is there for fan service as far as the audible sounds of the series is concerned, or the original, which I found extremely disappointing. I was really looking forward to seeing how they remix some of my favorite tracks like One More Kiss, The Marshall and Yard, or Mother. You go and search it up after you've played the game, you know what I mean. But none of that happened, and I was especially having an expectation because I had that satisfaction in Final Fantasy VII Remake, a remake that would happen some 23 or 25 years later, with majority of the original people doing an updated take with all the modern technologies of their vision. So you can imagine how cool it is to have something iconic like Final Fantasy VII even have its soundtrack updated with the OG master like Yumetsu-san. And that didn't happen with Resident Evil 2, unfortunately. I guess that people don't rate the music as much as I do, but that didn't happen, so that was disappointing for me. So my rating for Resident Evil 2 2019 would have been otherwise a 10 out of 10, but it was not quite there. So therefore I gave it a 9 out of 10. A very, 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 very good 9 out of 10. Just more compounded disappointment in those slight areas. But most of you guys won't care about that, so just go and play it before Resident Evil Requiem, because it will make all the more satisfying experience for you when you're seeing solid Snake old Leon S. Kennedy back with the quips, the puns, and the kicks. Subscribe or follow wherever you're watching this, wherever it makes sense. Appreciate you.